Good day, guys. Welcome back to another episode with the Duramax and the injector install. So in this video today, we are going to be doing the valve adjustment. We're going to be adjusting the valves, and then we are also going to be installing the injectors, installing the lower valve cover bases, upper valve cover bases, and I'm just going to kind of go over all of that. I am doing this like one part at a time. Hopefully it's helpful, but they're all the same. They're going to do the same thing, same procedures for all of it. So that's why I'm showing you like how to pull one injector, how to do a valve adjustment. Like today, we're just going to do that with one valve, with one set of valves per cylinder. So just kind of show you guys how to do that. I'll also take you underneath, hopefully can show you as good as possible the timing marks on the balancer and on the block itself. And that is located on the passenger side. So you got to get those lined up. When they're lined up, you're either going to have number 4 at top dead center, or you're going to have number 1 at top dead center. Depending on which one is at top dead center is going to depend on which valves you're going to adjust. So an easy way to find out which piston is at top dead center, you're going to want to do the rocker arms come to what they call a rocker bridge. That's what's pushing down the valves. So you're going to want to wiggle the bridges underneath the rocker arms. If both bridges are loose, then that means that cylinder is at top dead center. But remember, that's only for 1 and 4. You might have some others that are loose. So what you can do is you can go off of the chart, check. So if you think you have number 1 at top dead center, see which ones need adjusted, check all those bridges. If they're all loose, that it says that needs to be adjusted, then you know you're on the right one. Adjusting the valves is not scary. You're gonna need a 14mm wrench, a flat tip screwdriver, and then a 12 thousandths feeler gauge. All the valves are set at 12 thousandths. You're gonna be doing this by feel and by hand. There's really not a torque spec for this. It's not hard, but it is a little bit time consuming to make sure that you do it right. So as you can see here on my phone, this is, the red is for when number 1 is at top dead center. Those are the intakes and the exhausts that you're going to adjust. I'll go through this slowly in case you need to pause this video. And then the ones in the yellow is when number 4 is at top dead center, and that's what you need to adjust. The I stands for intake, the E stands for exhaust. So that is the list there of which valves will need adjusted. The exhaust ones are the longer rocker arms. The intakes are the shorter rocker arms, but they're all at 12 thousandths, but that is kind of how you tell right there. So we'll go into, like I said, installing the rest of the stuff. I'm going to show you how to adjust valves on one cylinder. We're going to do number 1. Number 1's at top dead center right now. And then we're going to be adjusting the intake and the exhaust because that is the piston that is at top dead center. I'll take you under, show you those marks, show you how to do a valve adjustment, show you how to install an injector, how to torque an injector down, and then installing the valve cover base, torque sequence for that, torque sequence for the upper valve cover, torque sequence for the injector lines. So hopefully this is going to be helpful for you. You're going to like watching it, so let's hop over to the pickup and keep making headway on it and hope, fingers crossed, everything keeps going as smooth as it has. So this is up under the front of the pickup. I made a little small circle with a paint marker to know when I was coming close to it. And then up above it, you can see there is a yellow line. I'm going to try to get this so we can see. You can see the yellow line is lined up with that aluminum tab. That aluminum tab, you have to have those in line. And then that is when number 1 or number 4 is going to be at top dead center. So that's what you're going to look for underneath the front of the pickup. So this is the passenger side front of the engine. This is your number 1 cylinder. It goes 1 in the front, 2 on the front on the driver's side, 3, 4 on the driver's side, 5, 6 on the driver's side, 7 in the very back, and 8 on the driver's side. That is the sequence. That is how they rotate. So this is the number 1. This is your intake because it's a shorter one. This is your exhaust because it's the longer one. These are the bridges I was telling you about. As you can see, that one is loose. And this one is also loose. So when those are loose, number 4, one's going to be loose and one's going to be tight. So we know that number 1 is at top dead center. You're going to want to take your 14mm wrench, and then you're going to loosen up the jam nuts at the top of the rocker arms. It's a bit harder to do. Got the camera in front of me, trying to make it so you guys can see. It is easier than this is looking. So they will be kind of snug, and then you can just loosen the jam nuts up like I did there. Once you have those loosened up, that's when you're going to take your flat tip screwdriver and your 12 thousandths feeler gauge. If I can show on the camera, 12 thousandths right there. You're going to slide that underneath your valve, put your screwdriver in the top. What I like to do is I like to turn it just barely and you'll feel it bump right when it stops. At that bump is the spot you're going to want to have it. It has light resistance. It's not tight, but it is not loose. It is definitely, you're going by fill. So once you have that bumped, use your screwdriver to hold the adjusting part of the rocker arm. Then you're going to come in with your wrench while holding, and you're going to tighten that up. So now that is tightened up. Since that is the short arm, we just adjusted the intake. You want to fill your feeler gauge, and that does feel good there. So you're going to come back in on your exhaust because this is the longer one. And you're going to do the same exact thing. You're going to use your screwdriver, turn it till you feel that bump. You're just going to turn it lightly. Sorry, that's kind of off of the screen. So you're just going to turn it kind of lightly till you feel that bump. And then that's where you're going to want it. Let me adjust this camera for you guys so we can see the whole thing. So right when you feel that bump right there, that's where you want it. You're not screwing it down real tight. You're not getting crazy with it because that is setting your valve lash. Once again, put the wrench on, hold the adjuster with your screwdriver, and tighten the jam nut down. So now that jam nut is tightened down, you're going to come back, check your feeler gauge, and that feels good right there. It's not too tight, not too loose. So now the valve lash is set for the number 1 on the short arm, the intake, the long arm, the exhaust, with a 12 thousandths feeler gauge. That's how you're going to adjust your valves. You're going to go through the sequence for what cylinder is at top dead center, and you're going to do all of them the same as we just did this one. So with your injector, you are going to have 2 O-rings. You're going to have a big one and a smaller one, as you can see the 2 of them there. And then you're also going to have your copper washer. Your large O-ring is going to go in this groove right here at the base of the injector. The small one, you're going to remove this cap, and it's going to go on right below the threads. So I like to use this Sil Glide it's from Napa. It's just a silicone lubricant. It makes it really nice for sliding on O-rings. But basically, I just like putting a little bit around the base here because that's where we'll be sliding that O-ring on. And then take the O-ring, put it over the tip of the injector. If I can get my hands out of the way, and then basically you want to slide it on. It can roll. You can twist the injector like around the body so it doesn't roll, but once you get it to here, I like to just kind of spin it a bit just to make sure that it's not rolled on the housing. And then I put the rest of that Sil Glide, the silicone lubricant, around that O-ring to make it easier pushing this into the cup. You're not going to need any of that for this upper O-ring. You're just going to take it and slide it over these threads. There's really no way of not rolling it on the threads. It'll go down on the base of the injector right there, as you can see. It is nice and loose. I like to put the cap back on until I am ready to put the injector in. And then I just remove the cap on the tip. I put just a bit of that silicone lubricant on the tip there. On the base, not much, just enough so I can put this copper washer on. It's not going to stay there. It'll burn off. It's going to melt. It's still going to seal, but that way that does not fall off. Then you're going to take your hold down, and it's going to go on like that, where this little foot is facing down. You do not want to put it on upside down like that, where that foot is facing up. That is the wrong way. So you'll put it on just like that. Also have your bolt cleaned up as well, your injector hold down bolt. And now we'll head over to the engine bay and I'll show you how to install this injector. So now we're over here at the engine. We'll be installing the injector. As you can see, I do have the others installed. You want to make sure that cup is clean, very, very clean down inside. Make sure this copper washer isn't still stuck down in there. I've cleaned all my cups. All the copper washers are out. I know that for sure. So slide your injector in. Then what I like to do is I like to just put a rag on the top and I just kind of wiggle it and kind of twist. And then you'll fill the injector, pop in, It just did. You can feel it. So that means the injector is seated. Do not use this hold down bolt to seat the injector into the cup. That is the wrong way of doing it, and you will damage the seal. Once you have this bolt threaded in by hand, make sure you're not cross-threading it, and it's all the way down. Then you're going to take your torque wrench, and it's 37 foot-pounds is what the hold-down bolt gets torqued to. Torque your hold-down bolt. So now my hold-down bolt is torqued. The injector has been seated properly. So that is the correct way of installing the injector. The next thing you want to do is wipe down this base where your lower valve cover is going to go on. And then we will put the valve cover on. I'll show you the torque sequence and what it is supposed to be torqued at for the bolts. Before we put the lower base on, you're going to want to get your fuel return line. That is this piece here. And you got your gaskets. They're like a metal sleeve that goes on. There is a bigger and a smaller. The big one goes on the top, the smaller one goes on the bottom. And then you have this one here, and then that is for this single line up here. These backs on these pieces will go into these grooves right here. I'll show you putting one of these. I'll show you putting these on. They're not hard to put on. You just want to make sure you have the small part at the bottom, and then basically they just slide on like that right there. So that is the correct way of putting that on. And then your one that looks like this, you only have one of them. That will go on up here on the single one to seal it as well. And then go ahead and install the other three the same as this one. So now we have all of them installed. You want to make sure you have everything clean. Make sure you have your bolts cleaned up. You have this hex head one that is going to go in the single end up here. And then the rest of these have Allen heads, and they go in the 4 of these into the injector bodies. So now we'll head over to the injectors. We'll remove the plastic plugs out of them, and we'll put this fuel return line on, and we'll torque it down. And when torquing it down, this hex head is going to be torqued to 11 foot-pounds. And then these ones with the Allen head that go in here, the 4 of those get torqued to 106 inch-pounds. So like I mentioned, you're going to come in here, you're going to remove these plastic caps off of the return on the injector bodies. There is 4 of them. That's what the plastic cap right there looks like. So remove all 4 of those and then get your return line, and we'll bolt it up. You'll take your fuel return line, this front piece goes on the front of the head on the passenger side, and it goes on the back of the head on the driver's side. So I like to just get the one on the back injector started first, because then I can hold the front of it. Then I'll come in with the hex head, and I'll put that on the front. That will hold this line in place, and you can install the other 3 bolts very easily this way, is how I found works really well for me. One thing you want to make sure is that you screw these bolts in by hand. You do not want to cross thread them. These bolts are hollow because these are banjo fittings. That's why they don't take a lot of torque, so you got to be kind of careful with them. By meaning hollow, you can see there, and then there's holes in the side. So that's how fuel passes through the bolt to go through the return line. But go ahead and install all these by hand and then torque them down to the specs that I've gave you. So once you've put your new gasket in this lower valve cover base, I mean, it's very easy to put in. As you can see there, you'll have the 2 lines. That is the surface that's going to mate to the head. There's a single one. That's what goes in the groove and sticks. You're going to take 12 of your bolts. I got newer ones. I was going to say 12 of your newer bolts. It's best to get new bolts because other ones have a tendency to strip out. So just go ahead and get some new ones and replace them. But you're just going to slide your cover down in here, being very easy with it. And then it will just go right into place. Like that. What I like to do is I like to take 2 of my bolts, put one in there, and then put another one in at the top here. With those bolts in there, you can wiggle this, and then the bolt will kind of fall into where they need to go. As you can see, it holds it up. So go ahead, put all of your bolts in, put them in by hand, screw them down. That way you know they're not cross-threading. Do not tighten them up.
Then we'll come back in. I'll tell you the torque spec and the torque sequence, because you do want to torque this down correctly, because this is an aluminum valve cover base. And if you don't torque it down correctly, you might warp it or crack it. So you want to avoid that at all costs. But go ahead and put all your bolts in, screw them in by hand until they make contact with the valve cover base, and then you'll come in and torque them. So for your lower valve cover base, and you're torquing it down, you're going to torque it down to 89 inch-pounds each bolt. And the torque sequence is going to be, this front one is going to be 1. This back one here, right back on the back of this cover, is 2. And then in the middle's 3, middle bottom's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Then you're going to come over to this side, and it's going to be 9, 10, top 11, and this bottom corner is 12. So you're going to torque down all 12 of those to 89 inch-pounds in that torque sequence. Once you've done it once, go back and do it a second time, because they will need to be torqued down more, because that gasket is starting to kind of flatten out. So make sure you go over it twice. Your next step now, since you get the valve cover base on, is you're going to install your injector harness. Remember, you set these to the side. This was for the front two. I've already put the back two in. I'll show you kind of like what I like to do. So we route this connector up in through the top. This piece will set down into the valve cover base at the top. Then your wires are just right here. You want to be very, very careful with these terminals on the injectors, not to strip them out. They are very fine threads. You do that, you're ruining an injector. So take your time with these. Make sure you get them started. Once I have those on there, I like to lift this up just a bit, squirt some silicone in underneath of this, because when we put the top valve cover on, we will have silicone on the top of it as well, sealing this harness coming through the base on the top and the bottom to prevent oil leaks. So once I've put the silicone underneath that, then install your 2 bolts that will hold this bracket on for that harness. And if you remember, these were your 2 bolts. So install those once you have the silicone under there, because with those bolts out will allow you to get the silicone underneath there. Then put those 2 bolts in, and then you're going to want to torque all of these down. For the injector terminal nuts, those are going to be torqued to 18 inch-pounds. The 2 bolts that hold this bracket on up here at the top, they will be torqued at 80 inch-pounds. So get all this on, torque these down, lift the top up, put your silicone under there, put your 2 bolts in here, torque those down to 80 inch-pounds, 18 on the injectors, and then we will prepare the top valve cover with the silicone, and we'll put it on, and I'll show you the torque for those bolts and the torque sequence on those as well. Once you have the valve cover prepared with the silicone, like I'm going to show you guys how to do, it's always best to remember to remove these caps, because you will not get them off when the valve cover is in. But I like to leave these on until I'm ready to set my valve cover on. That way I know dirt and debris is not getting into the inlet side of my injector, potentially ruining it or making it stick open. So that is one thing to remember, to take those off, but leave them on as long as possible. Now with your upper valve cover, you're going to want to make sure you clean it very good. As you can see this groove here, you want to make sure all the silicone is cleaned out of that. You're going to be laying a new bead of silicone around this whole valve cover. I will get that done, and then we will install the valve cover onto the engine, and I will show you the torque sequence and the specs to torque the 11 bolts that hold this on. So with your silicone, you're going to want to just lay a nice thin bead following this channel, because that is what is going to hold and seal this valve cover. So once you get your silicone on there, it should look roughly like that there, and just have the whole surface covered so it looks like a gasket. And then take it over and we will set it on the valve cover base. You're also going to need your 11 bolts, and of course I have new ones because I just like to replace it with new ones in case the old ones strip out or anything like that, so I can avoid any of that headache. So you're going to take your valve cover, be careful not to get your silicone on anything, bring it in slowly. Hopefully I don't block the camera with my arms, but you're going to bring it in and then set it down where it needs to go. Once you have it set down, take all your bolts just like the base, put them all in, screw them in by hand. Once you get them screwed in by hand, then we will torque them down. So let me get that done, and I'll show you, once I get them screwed in by hand, the torque specs and the sequence we need to do. So I've got all those screwed in by hand, and the proper torque sequence is going to be this front one right up here, facing the front. That's going to be 1. There's one at the very back middle. That's going to be 2. Then you can go 3 right here in the middle. 4, 5, 6, 7 is right behind this. 8, 9 will be at the top here. 10 will be this bottom corner. And 11 will be this other bottom corner. You need to go around that same torque sequence. You only have to do it once with this upper one. And like I said, 71 inch-pounds. That's what you want to torque it down to. You will see the silicone start squeezing out all the way around. Make sure you got it squeezing out all the way around. You'll know you have a good seal. Once you have that torqued down, then we'll come in and install the injector lines. I'm going to probably install 3 of them. I'll show you how I put 1 in and torquing it down as well. Okay, so as you can see, I have 3 of the fuel lines in. As I mentioned, I'll show you doing 1. I like to use just a little bit of that silicone glide that I have. It just makes it go a little bit smoother down through the valve cover without risking tearing a seal or anything like that. Basically, you just want to get your top lined up. I don't start the top nut. I just get it so it just kind of hangs on. And then I like to just kind of put a little downward pressure, screwing this one on, and then you can pull up, and it's pulling up so it's not on the injector yet. But I like to get it started on the injector first. And right there, now it is started on the injector. Then I like to come up to the fuel rail, start this one by hand as well. It's always great to start everything by hand. Make sure you're not cross-threading anything. You do not want to cross-thread your injector or your fuel rail, just causing more of a headache for you in the long run, which is not worth it. Then I just come in with a wrench, and I just go the rest of the way, just snug it down, making sure that it doesn't get tight as you're screwing it down and that it feels okay, which it is. Once I'm done doing that, then I will come in and torque them. And then to torque them, you're going to want a crow's foot on an extension just like this. It makes it so much easier with these. That is a must for this job. And you're going to torque these to 30 foot-pounds. So there is 30 there, and then come up to the fuel rail and torque it down to 30 as well. Sometimes you got to take this off, rotate that crow's foot so you can come back in to get another bite on the nut. So this line is now torqued at 30. I'm going to go ahead and torque the rest. The next thing you need to do is you need to put on the retainer and the bolt for this injector line, and it will hold this nut in case it backs off. But that will be the next step, and we are about finished up. So this is the retainer for your injector nut on your fuel line here. Putting these back on is going to be the same as removing them when we were disassembling. It's very easy. They just basically slide on. You start the little bolt into the cover. I do not have a torque spec on these. It is a small bolt and an aluminum valve cover, so you're not going to want to go super tight. It's not trying to hold anything major, just basically holding this line so it doesn't back off. So just snug it down with a wrench. Don't get crazy carried away with this because it will strip out very easily, being that this is aluminum and that is such a small bolt. But there's your basic, just installing injector, lower valve cover, return line, upper valve cover, fuel lines, fuel line retainer, doing the overhead, doing all of that. But I'm going to go ahead and put the rest of these retainers on. One good thing to note as well, take some silicone, put it around this line and this nut here, completely fill that up. That way, if you ever have to take these off again, it's not going to drop all that dirt and debris down around this line into your fuel injector if you have to take this off. So do that to all 8 of these. Just run a silicone bead around the top of all of them. That will help you in the future if you ever have to remove the lines for any reason to get back in here.
Alright, so hopefully that video is helpful and it's not too long for you. I try to put as much information in my videos and make it as helpful as I can for you. So if this is something you're needing to follow along with, I'm hoping that it'll help you out. But we have made tremendous progress on the Duramax. We have the new injectors in, we have the valve covers on, we have the fuel lines on. I'm going to let that sit overnight, let that silicone cure. Tomorrow I'm going to put everything back onto the top of the engine like we disassembled. I don't think I'm really going to do a video for that because it's just bolting everything back on. It's the same as taking it apart. Really, there's nothing special there like there is with injectors. There is a lot of torque specs for the upper and lower valve covers, injectors, fuel lines, all that. So that's why I was wanting to give that video to you guys. I will do a video on startup because I am very interested, happy, curious, anxious, just cannot wait to start this thing up. I can't wait to see how it sounds, how it runs, all that stuff. If you want to see more videos on this Duramax and how it runs, and this is something you're liking, definitely drop a comment down below. Let me know. Say, hey, I want to see some more Duramax footage. Or if you really don't like the Duramax footage, let me know too. I am open for all your guys' suggestions, bringing videos to you for stuff that is informative, easy to follow, easy for you to do as a reference. So that is the whole reason why I love doing these videos, because when I hear that it helps someone out, that is huge gratitude to me as getting this done, doing this myself. This is the first time I've worked on a Duramax. This is my pickup. I've worked on it before, but this is a bit of an extensive job. It's the first time I've done it. So if you are mechanically inclined or want to try your hands at doing this, I strongly suggest it. It's nothing to be extremely scared of. It is just a lot of stuff you got to pay attention to and just do close detail, be as clean as possible. I cannot stress that enough. Anytime you're opening up your fuel system, also opening up your engine. So just be extremely clean, attention to detail. You'll have it, you won't have anything to worry about, and it will work. And the outcome you'll be very happy with and feel that same gratitude that I have getting this far on it. But like I said, hopefully this video was helpful and informative. Like this video if you did. Drop a comment, let me know what you think. Let me know if you're excited to see the startup video and how it runs and all of that. But I really want to thank you guys so much for stopping in and checking out this video. All of your support is greatly appreciated. It's what keeps the channel going, and I can't thank you guys enough. So huge thank you to you guys. It goes out to you. You're the ones that make this channel what it is. But I will catch you guys all in the next one, and until then, take care.